Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 186 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. Mark, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. Yesterday, we had an Eagles playoff game, as we are going to talk about, where I had my biggest bet of the season riding on the game. We had, my one true love, Lamar Jackson, losing a playoff game at night, which always is going to cause me, angst online. And then not to mention in about 12, that's bad math, in about 8 hours and 15 minutes or so, Notre Dame's playing the biggest game of my lifetime of their football program. So I am on the hot seat for like a consecutive 30 hours, it feels like, from the Eagles game to the end of the Notre Dame game.
Yeah, you should just be a fan of a college football team that stinks and you can get your bowl game over with in like mid-December and not worry about it anymore.
Hey, I did that for a long time. It was called the Brian Kelly era. So I'm happy. Bright days ahead, hopefully. Well, and I don't know if we didn't talk about this on the show. I think it happened after our last week's show. Marcus Freeman interviewing with the Chicago Bears for their head coaching job. If they take him, I'll never forgive the Bears. The Bears become my new. I don't know, looks. I have to root for Freeman, but I think the Bears would be my enemy. What a nightmare that would be.
You need him to look good, but the Bears to somehow be bad.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how. That's a very fine needle to thread for a head coach. I'm not sure how you do it.
I'm not sure. I don't think it works.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Well, let's dive into it, Mark. We're going to go through and recap the 4 divisional playoff games from this weekend, and then we will preview the AFC and NFC Championship games next Sunday. That's all coming up on the show today. So those of you that are watching live, feel free to drop comments as we go along, and we'll see what you guys are thinking about the games. We'll start from the beginning. Let's roll the clock back to Saturday afternoon. The Houston Texans travel to the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chiefs win 23-14. And the Chiefs defense continues to keep this team afloat. They were outgained by 124 yards, but they held the Texans to 1 of 3 in the red zone, and they sacked CJ Stroud 8 times. And our guy, Mark, George Karlaftis, who, by the way, was a top 10 player for both Mark and I in the 2022 draft, and he inexplicably fell to number 30 to the Chiefs. George Karlaftis had 3 of those 8 sacks and 8 total pressures in the game. I saw on Twitter that this was the first instance of a team outgaining their opponent by 100 yards and not committing a turnover, but losing a playoff game. Previously, 46 straight teams had won in those circumstances. So you get the Chiefs' dark magic coming out in this game. And the Texans' defense played really well, too. Will Anderson had 4 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and 4 pressures. But ultimately, they never found an answer for Travis Kelce. He had 7 receptions for 117 yards, which is his high in yards for the season. He had a touchdown. And I think the two big deciding factors in this game were special teams and, unfortunately, officiating. But the special teams we can go to first. The Texans' special teams were anything but. They allowed a 63-yard kickoff return on the opening kickoff, and then they had another 15 yards tacked on for unsportsmanlike conduct. And a really bizarre Texans player takes his helmet off and throws it at the sideline and then pushed his special teams. I don't know what was going on there. They missed 2 field goals. They missed an extra point. And so the special teams were a disaster for the Texans. And then, unfortunately, penalties are a big factor in this game. 8 penalties for 82 yards against the Texans compared to 4 penalties for 29 yards against the Chiefs. And there were 2 huge penalties that went Mahomes' way. One was early in the game. There's a 3rd and 8 incompletion, roughing the passer call. That you have the announcers saying as they're showing replays, that's a bad call. And then later in the game, Mahomes baited defenders into tackling him on a scramble. Like he literally scrambles past the line of scrimmage, has nowhere to go, and waits until 2 defenders are moments from tackling him and drops to the ground and gets a flag. And it's bad when the announcers who are supposed to be unbiased and no. That was garbage.
To be fair, do we have the Troy Aikman tweet about Mahomes from a couple years ago? Troy Aikman is not unbiased about Mahomes.
Okay, but it wasn't just Aikman. You get the rules analyst on the thing too, talking about. And so, I mean, it was absurd. There was another one where Mahomes was up the sideline and like he just goes up the sideline until he's like inches from being pushed and steps out of bounds and then flops magnificently in front of the officials and cries because he doesn't get a flag. Asked about the officiating after the game, D'Amico Ryans said, quote, "We knew going into this game that it was us versus everybody. And when I say everybody, it's everybody." CJ Stroud said, quote, "I'm not going to go back and forth on what I thought was a call or what I thought wasn't a call. It's one of those things where you know what's up before you even walk into the arena." I'm sick of these talking points out of playoff games. I do not understand. It's so stupid. And you see it in another game that we're going to talk about in a minute, less slanted, but the Commanders had a huge penalty for a face mask that was called when a guy grabbed someone's shoulder pad to make a tackle. And within 2 seconds of the play being over, everybody knew it was the wrong call, but NFL rules don't allow that call to be changed. What is the point of this $20 billion corporation having cameras everywhere if you can't get the calls right? Like, these roughing the passer, unnecessary roughness penalties are so subjective. And every ounce of ambiguity in the rule is massively slanted towards Mahomes and the Chiefs. They have got to make this stuff reviewable and get these calls right, because nobody benefits from it more than, and credit Mahomes. He knows how to play the system. He knows how to use the player safety rules to his advantage. And he's great at selling flops to the officials. It's absurd. Like the NBA can give somebody a technical foul for flopping. There's rules in hockey where you can go in the penalty box for selling crap like that. The NFL's got to do something, because that's an abomination. That's not what we should be talking about out of this game, but it is the main talking point.
I think that it shouldn't be. I really don't think it should be. The Texans ran 21 plays and got the ball 4 times after they were down 1 point, 13-12. They didn't score a point. To me, I don't think the refs had an iota of an impact on the outcome of this game. I think Kansas City wins this game without the 2 flags that you referenced, because the other 2 he flopped and he didn't even get the call. So everyone's freaking out. The 2 flops he had, he didn't get the call. The flop that's going around social media and Twitter that everyone's using as Brady would have never done this. The people saying that don't remember the Patriots and don't remember Tom Brady, because that was a different era where quarterbacks weren't being protected at all. And
they literally also cheated their way to almost every Super Bowl they won. So maybe you don't use the Patriots as it. Tom Brady and the Patriots aren't the golden child there either.
I agree with you, but the same stuff was happening then, and I do think here and there are bad calls here and there. I actually think the one flag that they threw on the helmet to helmet or the late hit, I thought that was pretty dumb by the Texans to take that shot. I do think when a guy's going, I'm a little bit of a snowflake when it comes to the late hits on quarterbacks. I thought they got away with one in the Ravens game. Lamar got hip drop tackled out of bounds and no call. I'm of the opinion I'm ready to flag all of it. Justin, flag. It seems like certain guys get less protected than others. For
absolutely. Sure. If that was Patrick Mahomes, that's a penalty. The same thing happened to Jalen Hurts in his game. He was pushed 2 steps out of bounds to the ground, and there was no flag. If it's gonna be a flag against the Chiefs, make it a flag against everybody. It has to be consistent, and it is not.
The second one I thought was pretty bang bang, and I thought was close. The first one, it looked like helmet to helmet live, but it wasn't, and that's why it should be reviewable. I agree with that. I'm absolutely here to review everything. And I think in all sports, the fact that some things are reviewable, some things aren't, it's a joke. And the NFL doesn't want that, because then they're picking apart their officials. And we saw it when they made pass interference reviewable, and they just stuck with whatever call they made. They never overturned pass interference calls. I'm sure it would be the same thing, but that's what they should do. Because I do think that first helmet-to-helmet hit that they called, it looked like it live. I think one of the announcers said like, "Oh, the 15-yard flag coming there for helmet to helmet." And then when they slowed it down and you look at the replay, you're seeing that Mahomes gets hit like by his arms in the chest and flings his head back. I don't think that's even on purpose either. I think he got shoved, and it looked like it because his helmet was pretty close to there. So I think it's just these things are hard to officiate in real time, and there does probably need to be, if not reviewable, replay assist. Like we have all these replay assist things. It makes no sense to me sometimes. Like, oh, well, we did replay assist and we figured out that it was actually a first down, and it's like, well, then why can you do it for that and not for these other things? Like,
well, that's like last weekend too with I think it was at Stafford that they ruled that one a fumble, and then replay assist was like, no, it's not a fumble, it's a pass, but they couldn't throw the flag for intentional grounding, even though it was. Now that it like the pass interference thing was never going to work. That's too much of a judgment call. There's bumping on every but like face mask, roughing the passer, a helmet shot, like all of those things. It is a binary. You grabbed the face mask or you didn't. You made contact with the crown of the helmet or you didn't. Like those things are the things that need to be. It was a pass that was intentional grounding instead of a fumble. Like all of those things. What's the point of replay assist? I don't get it. It's really frustrating, and hopefully they can get that system fixed, because it seems like every other sport has their crap together more when it comes to officiating.
But the story of the game when it comes to Mahomes shouldn't be anything with the refs. It should be that throw he made to Kelsey for the touchdown to go up 8 points. Because once they went up 8 points in the third, or I guess that was actually in the fourth quarter, it spanned over into the fourth quarter. But you knew it was over. There was no way Houston was going to get back in that game. And obviously they get a field goal blocked late in the game, but that would have taken them down to, they would have been down. I think they would have been down 8 points again because KC had gotten a field goal by then. So Houston just blew a bunch of opportunities to score. Even the blocked field goal was so late in the game. Obviously, you have the missed field goal, you have the missed extra point, but yeah, I never really felt like this game was in danger, to be honest.
Yeah. Early on, it felt like the Texans were going to hang with them, and then it just went dry. But okay, let's go on to the night game, which was an awesome game between Washington and Detroit. And Washington wins 45-31. And Mark, I said last week on this show, I wouldn't be surprised if Jaden Daniels threw for 300 yards, rushed for 70, and led the Commanders to a win in a shootout. And dang it, if I wasn't close. He threw for 299 yards and rushed for 51 yards and won in a shootout. But the Lions were in a bad spot where they cannot get pressure without blitzing because of all of their injuries. And Jaden Daniels was the fourth best quarterback in the league by EPA this year when blitzed. And so the Lions shot their shot and blitz, tried to introduce variance into the game, and he just diced up the defense. The Commanders only punted the ball one time all game. They did have a turnover on downs. They did miss a field goal too, but they only punted once. The offense moved the chains. And it's not that the Lions offense didn't move the chains. It's that Goff just imploded. Jared Goff threw 3 interceptions. He had a fumble. 1 interception was returned for a touchdown, which, by the way, shout out Frankie Louvu for another helmet-to-helmet cheap shot on a quarterback that wasn't flagged. Again, let's get replay on this stuff and get it right. But 1 interception was returned for a touchdown. Another interception was in the end zone. Another interception was inside the red zone, and he had a fumble in the red zone. So Goff just imploded in this game. And I thought Ben Johnson made some major mistakes in this game too. And I'm not even going to talk about like the Jamison Williams interceptions. Like they ran a few trick plays that worked. That one didn't. I'm not going to kill him on, but Jahmyr Gibbs rushed 14 times for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had 7.5 yards per carry, and they continued to put the ball in Jared Goff's hands, and they went away from what was working. And so I thought Ben Johnson made some questionable decisions in this game. And ultimately, the Lions defense is just too beat up. The Lions defense isn't good enough. And Jaden Daniels got hot. And I was wrong about everything with the Commanders this offseason. I didn't like the Dan Quinn hire. Dan Quinn, by the way, massively has changed his stripes when it comes to like decision making on fourth downs and things. And we'll see how that plays out long term. because you're probably going to lose your offensive coordinator. And that's the number one thing I don't like about getting a defensive head coach. And so we'll see. Maybe I'm still right on that part of it, but I didn't like the Quinn hire. I hated the Cliff Kingsbury hire. And maybe Cliff Kingsbury is just a great offensive coordinator that shouldn't be a head coach. He's probably going to be a head coach again, though, now. And I was wrong about Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels was my QB3 in the draft. I had him at 15 overall. And I mean, I didn't hate that. I would have taken Drake May. I said that, but I didn't hate them taking Jaden Daniels. But I had a lot of concerns about Daniels, especially his ability to stay on the field and to avoid pressure at the next level. But all three of those guys have been outstanding this year. And so I feel like this game shows a couple things, and you can lump the Vikings into this too. It shows that if you can pick between a superstar roster with a replacement level quarterback or a special quarterback with a replacement level roster, you take the special quarterback every time, because the special quarterback can show up in the playoffs and change games. And I mean, Detroit's defense, even with all their injuries, they're probably somewhat equivalent to Washington's defense, right? But Jaden Daniels stepped up in a way that Jared Goff can't do. And so you take the quarterback every time, and it absolutely looks like Washington hit on the quarterback.
Yeah, I'll look at the other side first with Detroit. And you have obviously everybody came into that game off of the Vikings game, and we kind of thought, oh, maybe the defense found something and fixed something. We kind of pointed out when we talked about that game that the Vikings moved the ball plenty. It wasn't really an issue with the Vikings not moving the ball. It was turnovers and not being able to do anything in the red zone. And now you see what the Vikings did against the Rams defense that didn't necessarily look perfect against the Eagles. I think they gave up near 400 yards. So obviously it was a pretty good performance in some way for the Rams against the Eagles. But you look at the Rams defense against the Vikings, and it's pretty similar to what happened with the Lions defense against the Vikings. It was probably just a situation where the Vikings offense had run out of gas. You look at the 5 games before that for the Lions, they played obviously the Packers and Bills, 2 pretty good offenses. They also played 2 games against the Bears and 1 game against the dead 49ers. They gave up 30 points per game over that 5-game stretch before their last game against Minnesota. I think that we all need to pump the brakes a little bit when we're talking about Washington's offense. This is an offense that put up 23 against Tampa the week before. It's not like they were putting up 40 in those situations. I think this is a situation where Detroit threw themselves out of the game. And you said it perfectly. Jahmyr Gibbs was unstoppable. 14 carries for 105 yards. You gave Montgomery too many carries. Montgomery was pretty good, I think, generally 4 yards per carry. Not good, but 7 carries for 28 yards. But when Jahmyr Gibbs is averaging 7.5 yards per carry, why are we giving Montgomery half of the amount of carries as Gibbs? It should be a lot less than that. I thought that made a pretty big difference there. And then it comes down to this Lions defense had fleas. And I tweeted it on Halloween, one of my best takes ever. I think it was right after Hutchinson went down. I said, it will not be the year for the Detroit Lions in a year where their best player, Aiden Hutchinson, is out for the year. That was never going to happen. And I know they got the 1 seed, and part of that was because I think they had started 7 or 8-0 or 7-1, whatever it was. But I think you can point to that exact moment as when people should have stopped taking the Lions too seriously as a real deal Super Bowl contender. But Dan Campbell tricked people. People love the coordinators, and people talked, and they won enough games that people stuck with it and kept them as the favorites in the NFC. It was clear that defense had major problems. And I think there's an argument that defense might have had problems in the playoffs with all the guys healthy. We talked in the offseason about certain positions that they kind of had mismanaged over the last couple drafts and not shored up. I thought that they, for the last couple years, I've said that they don't have the second pass rusher with Hutchinson on the other side or on the defensive line, and they still don't really have that, in my opinion. So I think that this game is more about Detroit than Washington, and it's more about Detroit failing on defense, and it's more about Detroit not having those guys healthy on defense. And I think this was just kind of a classic ran out of gas game for the Detroit defense, and not to mention, like you said, 3 picks for Jared Goff, and when I think was there 5 turnovers? Yeah, 5 turnovers for Detroit in this game. I think that there's a chance. And I don't want to be too confident because I was too confident with the Eagles last week. I think there's a chance, and we're going to get to the Eagles next. People are a little overinflating that Commanders win based on 5 turnovers and based on the fact that they played a defense that I think was totally out of gas.
Yeah. Shoot. I lost a stat I was going to give you, so I'll come back to it here in a minute.
I'll touch on something else you said while you're looking for it. You mentioned Cliff. It kind of seems like Cliff's not going to get a job. And I don't think I would hire him yet. I'd probably want to see a second year and see how he handles Jaden's kind of – there's a lot of sophomore slumps a lot of times in a quarterback's second season. We'll see. Bobby Slowick was a guy I was pushing to be hired by everybody last year, and this year did not have a very good season. People want him fired. So I would probably still wait a year, but – what I would say more than anything with this Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels pairing has kind of makes me think that Kyler Murray stinks.
Yeah, I saw that you'd mentioned that earlier or on Twitter earlier, and that's a possibility for sure. I found what I was looking for. So we talk about Washington, and first of all, in this game, Detroit had a better offensive success rate than Washington did. Detroit had a 58% offensive success rate. Turnovers just killed them. But Washington has allowed a 58 and a 53% success rate in their 2 playoff games against Tampa and Detroit. This defense isn't that good. They feasted off of turnovers, and they've had some really good offensive outputs, but I think the defense is still very much a concern for Washington. Their defense, it's not that their defense played great. It's that they came up with key turnovers. And, we'll get to previewing in a minute, but they're going to face an Eagles team that has not been turning the ball over. And so we'll see how that plays out. But let's talk about that Eagles team. They beat the Los Angeles Rams 28-22. And what started as a good weather game and quickly developed into a Snow Bowl type of game. But Jared Verse had an incredible game for the Rams. He had 4 pressures and 2 sacks. Both of those sacks were on third downs to push the Eagles out of field goal range. Matthew Stafford was dying to throw an interception in this game, and Eagles defensive backs would not oblige him. Opening drive, Darius Slay hit in the hands, drops it. Later, Isaiah Rodgers, who's in for Quinyon Mitchell, who got injured on the first drive, tackling Matthew Stafford, which, by the way, how do you end up getting tackled, or how do you end up getting injured tackling a 36-year-old Matthew Stafford? Just bizarre. But Isaiah Rodgers
do you want to hear a little conspiracy on that?
What's that?
I have a little bit of a conspiracy on Quinyon that he was concussed and that he went to the blue tent and that they realized he was concussed and that they had him basically fake a shoulder injury so he wouldn't have to deal with protocol.
Okay. I don't know.
The broadcast made it seem like it was concussion at first, and it seemed like they were taking him. I think he got taken off the field for that.
Yeah.
That's just a theory. Just a theory. Because he was apparently in the locker room with nothing on his shoulder after the game, saying he was good to go.
Yeah.
Just conspiracy.
Okay. Well, I really hope that's not the case. But regardless, Isaiah Rodgers, in relief of Quinyon Mitchell, has the ball in his hands, gets it taken away by a receiver. Cooper DeJean was hit in the hands with one. Eagles defensive backs refused to take the gifts that Matthew Stafford was handing out. Jake Elliott had a weird day, misses an extra point, hits field goals from 44, 37, and 23 yards in the snow, and then missed a PAT that very much could have mattered. Because it's after Saquon rips off a 78-yard touchdown run to go up 13. He misses the extra point. The Eagles have a 99% win probability, up 13 with 4.5 minutes left. They give up a sub 2-minute touchdown drive. They go 3 and out. They give up another drive to the red zone, And I mean, the game, they lose if the Rams score a touchdown and hit the extra point. But Jalen Carter gets a sack to put the Rams in 4th and long, and the Eagles get a stop, and they hold on and win the game. And Saquon Barkley became the first player in NFL history with 200-plus scrimmage yards against an opponent in the regular season, and then against that same opponent again in the postseason. So Saquon, we used to call Boston Scott the giant killer. I guess we have to call Saquon the Ram killer now. A.J. Brown had a bad game in this one. He had 115 consecutive targets without a drop coming into this game, and he dropped 2 passes, one of which directly took points off the board for the Eagles. So rough game for A.J. Brown, really rough game for the Eagles passing attack. The snow didn't help things. Jalen Hurts getting twisted over on his knee really didn't help things either. And that's probably a huge thing to monitor this week is what Jalen Hurts' knee injury is like and if he's mobile. Because if he's not, that could spell a lot of problems for the Eagles next week.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the positive guy and tell everybody to calm down. I'm not worried about Jalen's knee as much as everybody else is. I feel like there was a couple rollouts after the knee injury where I thought he looked fine enough. And if they were going to roll him out immediately after it happened, I don't think that it's something that'll too much affect the game plan. Maybe there's not as many design runs. Maybe he doesn't have a 44-yard, rushing touchdown next week. But I'm actually, by the way, I don't think we're going to find anything out about it all week long. We're not going to find any information about it. So it's going to be a storyline. People are going to talk about it all week long. I'm not too worried about it. I think he's going to be able to do enough to roll out in the pocket and to at least have the threat of the read option. I think they'll do a pull. He'll pull one early to at least show that he can do it. And we'll see how he reacts to that. But I actually think I feel like normally I freak. And when it happened, I freaked out. When he came back into the game, I'm not too worried about it, to be honest. I think they'll shoot him up with enough stuff and get enough medicine in him all week long and some rehab. I think he'll be fine for next week. I want to focus on another Jalen. I want to focus on Jalen Carter because what Jalen Carter has done in this game and all year long, he's the most impactful defensive lineman in the entire NFL that's remaining, in my opinion. And I have a screen here that I wanted to share. It was Orlovsky, who I think stinks, but he tweeted it out. I'm going to full screen that here. And let's mute him. But I think that this is really interesting. This sack, someone absolutely falls in the background. That's probably a touchdown to Higbee right there.
Yeah.
That I don't know who that is that fell. Or maybe he goes down to the 1 or 2 yard line. But if Jalen Carter doesn't break through a double team on that play where he baits the center or he baits the guard into thinking he's going the other way. So he goes to the tackle to help and he makes it through that and makes that sack. That's just one of the many plays he made in the game. But I thought it was his best game of his career. And he's had a couple, I think that Saints game, he was insane this season, but to make the impactful plays he did at the times he made them, just an incredible, incredible game from Jalen Carter. I mean, I think he's the MVP of the game. I know everybody's going to focus on Saquon. I think what he did on defense was just as valuable. He was an absolute animal.
It's also pretty cool that for the first time in his career, he got held by an offensive lineman. It's never happened before, but for it to happen in a playoff game, that's pretty cool too.
And another guy on that D line that has become one of my favorite players now is Nolan Smith. I mean, What this guy has turned into. I don't know. I don't know what his finishing stats were in that game. I know in the previous 8 games, he had 6 sacks and 8 tackles for loss, including last week's playoff game. So I know he had a forced fumble and a sack in the game. That might be an attack. Okay, he had a sack, a tackle for loss, and a forced fumble. So make that 7 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and a few forced fumbles over the last 9 games. He has really turned into one of the best edge rushers in the sport over the second half of the year. And maybe the biggest development of all of it is that he's become, I think he actually is graded out as a top 25 edge rusher against the run on PFF, and take that with a grain of salt. But at the very least, he's holding up. in the run game, and they're leaving him out there for a ton of snaps. I didn't look at the snap report from this game from Jimmy Kempski, but he, I mean, it felt like every time I looked out there, he was on. He was there rushing the passer or even dropping back a couple times. But I think Nolan Smith, his development, you just have to credit that 2023 first round draft class from Howie. I mean, that's a pretty unbelievable defense changing couple picks there with kind of solidifying your top edge rusher and your top D tackle for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, he played, let me see on the snap counts here. Nolan Smith played 58 of 71 snaps in this
actually
game.
A little lower than I would have guessed, to be honest, but still, that's a ton of snaps. And when he was drafted, we very much thought he would be a pass rush specialist with that maybe, hopefully, could play some running, could hold his own basically in the running game, not be good.
Oh no, I was the opposite, actually. I thought I remember talking about with Nolan Smith that he was a guy that the traits didn't match the skills because he was so light and fast. But what I thought he was best at was stopping the run. And I was like, I don't know if he can stay that good stopping the run against NFL offensive linemen, but if he can retain like some of that efficacy and develop as a pass rusher. And it turns out like he's just a monster still in the run game, which does not make sense. And
it was a size conversation, more than anything else. It wasn't really about him as a player. It was just nobody his size is really playing against the run at that position. And he's absolutely translated.
In the first 10 games of the year, Nolan Smith had 12 pressures. He has 32 pressures in the last 8 games.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. He is really turned into our best edge rusher. And I felt like Josh Sweat was a little quiet in that game. He said after the game that he'd rather play on that bleeping Brazil field than the snow yesterday, which I thought was funny. But it did feel like our pass rush was pretty dependent on Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith getting home. Obviously, Moro Ojomo and Jalix Hunt, a couple big plays sprinkled in, and pretty fun for those guys to make impacts. Obviously, deep pick in Ojomo, a project pick, and Jalix Hunt.
And Oren Burks too. Oren Burks deflected
absolutely.
a pass on that final drive too.
Absolutely. Obviously, Isaiah Rodgers returns the touchdown. He had a couple negative plays as well. But Isaiah Rodgers returned a touchdown. And then just looking at the defense.
He got down to the 10.
Oh, yeah.
On the fumble.
Duh.
Which was good because the Eagles couldn't score from first and goal from the 9-yard line. But, that is what it is.
Yeah, that's fair. I can't believe I can't believe I did that right there. But I would say, the Rams had over 400 yards here of total offense. And the Rams obviously were able to move the ball, especially at the end of the game. I don't know if we've mentioned it, though, or we did mention it at the start. Do you think that 2-minute drill looks a little different with Quinion out there?
I don't know. That's been an Achilles heel for the Eagles this year.
Sure.
I mean, the Falcons game, they gave up a game-winning drive at the end. The Washington game, they gave up, granted, they got an interception that should have sealed the game and didn't, and then gave up the 2-minute drive. They gave up a 2-minute drive and then almost a second one at the end of this game. And so that has been a weakness for the Eagles. And I feel like, so the first drive, they got real soft spot drop zony, and Stafford just picked it apart. And I didn't like that decision. I'm a big proponent of, like, if you're up 2 scores with like 2 minutes left, sure, drop into your prevent stuff, make it take a minute and a half. That's fine. But at the point where like your offense has really struggled, and if you give up a 2-minute drive and go 3 and out, you're going to have to clamp down to get a stop. I do not like getting soft coverage like that. And then he got blitz happy again on that last drive for a couple of plays. It's like, stop blitzing, like stop it, knock it. Bad Vic, like don't. And he does that at the end of games, and I don't like it, but they're able to get the stop, so we don't have to be too upset about it. But I love Fangio for the first 58 minutes of the game. In the last 2 minutes, he does scare me a bit.
Part of me does, and I know we have had even another game, the Jacksonville game, you had to get a game-winning interception in the end zone. They did kind of march down the field in that game to put a scare in us at the very end. So I do think it's a consistent problem, and I think it's for the reasons you laid out. There is part of me that thinks if Quignon's out there, it doesn't happen twice in like 2 minutes. But maybe that's wishful thinking. I do think they missed Quignon in this game. Like, Stafford throws for what? How many? 320 something in this game? 324. It's probably. I think that number's probably under 300 if Quignon's out there.
Yeah,
and yeah,
as I say, the pressure thing was huge too, which is something I called out on my preview show with Johnny and our Patreon. That you have to pressure Stafford without blitzing. It's key. And the Eagles pressured Stafford on 13 dropbacks in this game, and he completed 4 passes for 34 yards. On 37 dropbacks when he wasn't pressured, he completed 22 passes for 290 yards. You got to make him uncomfortable. And the Eagles, when they were able to do that, the defense was excellent.
Yeah, and then you look at the Jalen Hurts stuff, and people are going to talk about only 128 yards. You look at Josh Allen and Mahomes; they had pretty similar games yesterday. He didn't turn the ball over. Obviously, the safety was bad. He took a couple bad sacks, but I thought a lot of it was just that the O-line did not hold up well on a couple of those plays. And then you also had the A.J. Brown 2 big drops. Obviously, the one would have caused a first down around midfield. The one would have probably been if not a touchdown, a play right down to tush-push territory. So I think if you add a couple of those, obviously you had the big play to Goddard called back for an eligible man downfield. You had I just felt like every 50-50 ball and every like swing play went the Rams' way, and the Eagles still won the game. Yeah. And that's probably a glass half full positive way of thinking, but Isaiah Rodgers literally picking the ball and handing it to the other team as they were falling to the ground. Like weird plays. Like you said, multiple missed interceptions out there throughout the game. And obviously the snow had an impact on that, but it just felt like I guess Kyron had a fumble and Stafford had a fumble. The Stafford fumble was knocked out of his hands, but it did feel like the Rams were pretty lucky to be in that game in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I will say the interior offensive line for the Eagles has been a big problem in 2 playoff games. They've allowed 15 pressures and 4 sacks on 58 dropbacks. And remember that not every sack or pressure is charted to an offensive lineman if it's deemed the quarterback's fault. So this isn't just Hurts holding the ball a long time. That's a 26% pressure rate and a 7% sack rate in the playoffs allowed by your 3 interior offensive linemen. And that's simply not good enough. That has to be better moving forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's definitely a concern, and they're busting right through the face of the offensive line and getting right in his face. So it's hard for him to even escape up the pocket because they're right there. It's not pressure from the edge. So, and I didn't think Mailata played well in this game. He definitely had multiple reps where it looked like Verse kind of cooked him getting to the pocket. And I know some of those aren't Mailata's fault necessarily, but yeah, it was a concerning game from the O-line. I guess the lucky thing I'd say is that I don't think there's, the Bills or the Rams really scare you at all in terms of the defensive line really brutalizing the O-line the way that the Rams did. Or I should say the Bills or the Commanders. The Chiefs, as a potential Super Bowl opponent, would be a problem with Chris Jones, especially, and a couple, Karlaftis, obviously. So I think the Chiefs are probably a pretty bad matchup for the Eagles. We obviously have a game to get to before that one, so I don't want to look too far ahead. But I'd say if you're not betting on the game, you don't have a vested interest, and obviously I don't think I have to tell people this, you should probably root against the Chiefs. Yeah. The AFC Championship. If the Eagles win the NFC Championship, I'd say Buffalo would be a significantly better matchup for the Eagles, especially on that conversation of the O-line.
Yeah, go Bills. Well, let's talk about the Bills. The Bills get the win last night over the Ravens in heartbreaking fashion for the Ravens, 27-25. And Turnovers and 2-point conversions decided this game. It started early with a Lamar interception and then a strip sack on back-to-back drives. And the Bills took a 21-10 lead into half, but Lamar was flawless in the second half. He leads a field goal drive and then a touchdown drive with a failed 2-point conversion to make it 19-22. The Bills kick a field goal to go up 24-19. And the Ravens are driving once again when Mark Andrews fumbles. His first fumble since 2019. The Bills get into field goal range, kick a field goal, so the Ravens get the ball back down 8 with 3:23 left. This is that weird position where it's like, it's not just score a touchdown. It's that we then have to get a 2-point conversion. So do we try to hurry so if we fail, we have time to get the ball back? Or do we run it down to the end so we don't get it and then give Josh Allen the ball? Well, they end up scoring the touchdown with 1:33 remaining. And on the 2-point conversion attempt, they throw to an open Mark Andrews who dropped it. Just brutal stuff there. And especially when you consider it was Isaiah Likely in week 1 against the Chiefs that his toe was on the end line, right? Was that Likely or was that Andrews? I can't remember. I think it was Likely. So yeah, the Ravens lose the season opener with a toe being out of bounds on, it was a 2-point, no, it was a touch. I don't remember. Toe out of bounds cost him the game against the Chiefs in week 1. Drop cost them a chance. And there's no, I mean, they might not have stopped Josh Allen, but it cost them a chance to try. And that's heartbreaking for the Ravens. I like both of these teams. I love Lamar, love Josh Allen, and I hate that one of them had to lose this game. I wish we could throw the Chiefs out of the playoffs and rematch this one next week for an AFC Championship game. But Josh Allen didn't do that much through the air. He only threw for 127 yards, but the Bills' run game has been spectacular. They have faced the two defenses with the best rushing success rate allowed so far in the playoffs in Denver and Baltimore at 33 and 35%. And they've had 50 and 55% rushing success rates. Their run game is what's winning them games right now. And Josh Allen's certainly a part of that run game. And you feel pretty good about Josh Allen if it has to turn into a shootout too. But Josh Allen scored a rushing touchdown in this game. He now trails Steve Young for the most quarterback rushing touchdowns in the playoffs by 1. He has 7. Steve Young has 8. But it took Steve Young 22 games to do it, and Josh Allen has done it in 12. So the Bills get the win. What were your takeaways from this one?
I don't know if I've ever felt worse for an athlete, like non-injury related, than I feel for Lamar Jackson and the amount of crap he's going to have to take from the worst faith arguers. And they're going to be bad faith arguments all off season long. And by the way, we're all talking about Mark Andrews today, all the memes and all the, we're all making the jokes. In 2 years, maybe even less, people won't remember why they lost that game. People won't remember that Mark Andrews fumbled the ball while they were driving to tie the game. And then people won't, or actually they would have been take the lead at that point. And people won't remember that Mark Andrews dropped the ball that would have tied the game. People will only remember that Lamar Jackson lost to Josh Allen. And that's all that it's going to be. Lamar Jackson had double the amount of total yards that Josh Allen had in this game. Yes, he had a pick. That pick turned into 0 points. The Bills went 3-and-out and punted from that pick. So we can litigate the turnovers all we want. The fumble is something Lamar's going to have to live with for a long time, and something that Lamar is going to have to, that's something he's going to have to make sure doesn't happen in the future. It feels a lot like Jalen in the Super Bowl a little bit. That fumble that kind of really turned the game, in my opinion, in the Super Bowl. It kind of felt the same here to me in this game. And I will say something about the Bills defense. And I just said I'll be rooting for the Bills next week partially, although I think I'm going to have a mega max bet on the Kansas City Chiefs next week in the AFC Championship. So it'll be a weird rooting interest for me. I want the Bills for the Eagles, but I'll probably want the Chiefs for the bet. I think the Bills defense in these big games has a trait of running out of gas down the stretch and kind of just giving giving up whatever the offense wants. There was a couple of those drives in the second half for Baltimore that were so easy. I mean, if you just take their last 5 drives to end the second half, they get a field goal to go down 14-10. They were on the 1 yard line, and you can't score a touchdown on 2nd and goal. That's a failure on the Ravens for not figuring out how to get Henry or Lamar out in space and into the end zone. But you get a field goal. After that, in the second half, a 9-play field goal drive that, again, they probably should have figured out a way to get in the end zone. After that, 7-play, 80-yard touchdown. After that, a 6-play drive that they were moving the ball, and then Mark Andrews fumbles. After that, 8-play, 88-yard touchdown to end the game. I don't think they're going to have the same luck in these situations. And then not to bemoan too much of it. You look at what the Bills did offensively after that last touchdown drive in the first half, which was aided by a terrible, terrible defensive pass interference call on 3rd and 5 for Buffalo. They went punt, field goal, and then end of game. They had a stretch in this game where you punted 3 straight times. I don't think you can do that against Kansas City. And I think that there was some stuff in this game where I kind of was towards the end of the game, I was kind of like, whoever wins this game, they don't have a chance next week. And the fact that this was such a war where they had to go to the very last second to kind of fight each other. I really, really think that this is kind of this. I'm not going to say this was the Bills Super Bowl. Obviously, everybody knows what the Bills Chiefs rivalry is. And I'm sure beating Mahomes means more than anything to Josh Allen. But I kind of think this was the Bills kind of blowing their wad a little bit here and that's the problem of not being the 1 seed when there's 3 elite teams. Like, you see it in all sports, you see it in the NBA, you see it in all these sports where the 1 seed gets such a massive advantage when the 2 and the 3 are so clearly the next 2 best teams. Chiefs had to go play the Texans. They get an extra day of rest. And I know this isn't the preview, but I really do think that it's Chiefs in the Super Bowl again here.
Yeah, I don't want to see the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but
yeah,
it may be where we're headed. Well, let's flip over to preview, and why don't we just start with that game since we've already been talking about it a bit here, and then we'll jump back to the NFC Championship game. So AFC Championship.
I forgot something real quick.
Okay.
For that the field goal that McDermott took on the 3-yard line or the 2-yard line on 4th and goal to go up 8 instead of going for a touchdown to go up 11 or 12. What would you have done in that situation? Because I thought the field goal was crazy. I thought Baltimore having a chance to tie that game was nuts.
So what would remind me? I can't remember exactly what the time left was.
So it was 24-19 Bills, and there was
like 3.5 minutes left.
3.5 minutes left. 4th and goal on the 2. Baltimore had 1 timeout.
Yeah. So let's back up a bit. Was it they had 2nd and goal on the 2, right?
Yes. 2nd and goal on the 7.
Third and goal on the 2. That got nothing. So I saw people were saying QB sneak it twice, and I didn't like that. I would have kicked the field goal personally because I think it's the right call in that, because kicking the field goal doesn't just mean you can't lose in regulation. It means it also means you don't have to change how you play defense. So we see teams all the time when you're down, 7, we're down 5. We don't want to give up the big play, right? We want to, let's say you go for it. You don't get it. You're up 5 with 3.5 minutes left. The ball gets pushed out, I think, to the 20-yard line on a miss that close, right? Or no, sorry. That's a field goal. Sorry, whatever. It's 98 yards, 3.5 minutes, whatever. If you're up 5, you're going to change the way you play defense because you don't want to give field goal range doesn't matter. You don't want to give up the big play touchdown, I think. You kick the field goal and you go up 8. All of a sudden, not only can you not lose in regulation, you also don't have to change how you give up play defense, because if you give up a 70-yard touchdown pass, who cares? They still have to go for 2 in 1 play. It's like you remove that, we could get beat on a big play. You remove the potential to lose in regulation. Overall, I would have kicked the field goal there. Obviously, a touchdown ends the game, but I would feel pretty good about going up 8 and forcing not only a drive, but also then that 2-point conversion.
Yeah, maybe I'm a sicko. I would have went for the kill. I think I would have tried to score it, and then if you can't get it, you have to go 98 yards, and you still have to score a touchdown. And I know I do get what you're saying with the way that the defense has to play. Another strategy question for you before we move to the championship, and I forgot about this when we talked about the Eagles game, and this isn't getting talked about at all, and it didn't end up mattering. But when Jalen Carter makes that sack on third down, it's fourth and let me make sure I have
it. Was 4th and 11.
4th and 11. But there was 1 minute and 14 seconds left when Jalen made the sack. Would you have called a timeout there? Because to me, we had 3 timeouts, and they were on the 22-yard line. So if they would have got a first down, they would have been first and goal. And more than likely, it would have been first and goal if they got a first down. So I was kind of thinking, and I was more even thinking this when it was a 3rd and 2 about like whatever happened on that play. If it was whatever, was there an argument to call a timeout and stop the clock with like 1 minute and 12 seconds left? Because at that point, the clock didn't matter to the Rams. They were going to be able to get enough plays off to score if it would have been first down with 30 seconds left, even the way that they waited. So I think they would have been able to get 3 or 4 plays off the way that they would have done it. But should we have called a timeout after that sack just in case?
I would not have. So if they pick up the first down on 3rd and 2, I would have used a timeout because then they're first and goal with 1:10 left and time's no longer an issue for them. Once you sack them, I want them scrambling against a running clock to try to convert a 4th and 11. Like, I don't want to call a timeout and let McVay draw something up. Like, you can make an argument for let them scramble up to the line of scrimmage and burn all that time and see what they line up in, and then call the timeout after they've burned all that time to begin with to get into what you want based off of their look. But again, I don't think I would want to give McVay the opportunity to draw something up. So if they converted that 3rd and 2, I would have started taking timeouts. But when that sack happens, I would not call a timeout there. I want them scrambling against a running clock, which was part of my big issue. This is going way back and way down a rabbit trail, but the way the Eagles played the Commanders at the end of the regular season on that final drive, it came up to a 3rd and 1, and the Eagles played a super light box and just let the Commanders run for the first down and call their final timeout. I would have stacked the box on that play, and we're not surrendering the run. And if we stuff you, it's now 4th down and you can't spike it, and you have no timeouts with a running clock with like 30 seconds left. But that's something that nobody else probably remembers. I just remember being really irritated by it at the time.
There was part of me that was just like, if they get this first down, the game's over, was kind of how I was feeling, even on the 4th and 11. And I would have said, let's call a timeout at 1:14 here after the sack. And if they don't convert the first down on 4th down, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. You still were able to waste the clock. And if they do convert it, then you have 2 timeouts to work with 1:14 left. And maybe they get too cute trying to play the clock a little bit. Like, I actually felt like, I get what you're saying though. If you think here's, I guess my issue with that is like, you don't want McVay to draw it up. If you're the Eagles, shouldn't you have some level of confidence in Fangio to draw something up? Like, vice versa? Potentially,
but when you're talking about a defensive coordinator drawing something up, all they can really draw up is a blitz
based on what they're given.
Because everything other than a blitz, you're allowing the offense to dictate your look to you. And Stafford's really good when blitzed. And so, I mean,
I wouldn't have wanted the blitz.
Yeah. It could be a different thing. Maybe if you could then call another timeout once you see, I don't know. I wouldn't have called especially the way your offense was playing too. Like, your offense did nothing in the second half except a 78-yard Saquon Barkley run. So I don't know. I kind of feel like if you get the ball back with a minute left down or a ball back with 5 seconds left down, the outcome's the same. The offense was not scoring in that situation. I would have just done whatever I could to make the offense for the Rams feel frazzled.
I agree. That's fair.
So, okay, let's flip the script over now. Let's talk preview for the championship game. We'll start off with Buffalo at Kansas City. This is the later game on Sunday, but the Bills are there's a bit of a theme with championship games, and it's potential revenge games. The Bills are the only team to take down the Chiefs starters this season. The Chiefs lost 2 games. One was to the Bills. The other was week 18 when they didn't play anybody. This is the 9th meeting between Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. They have each won 4 of the previous 8, but Mahomes has won all 3 postseason matchups. And so Josh Allen's looking to get his first postseason win against Mahomes. And we're going to get I said this during the NFL draft, when the Buffalo Bills traded down with the Chiefs and the Chiefs took Xavier Worthy. I said, we are going to sit here after an AFC Championship game where Xavier Worthy catches a 70-yard touchdown pass, and we're going to talk about how stupid that was for the Bills. Well, we get the Worthy versus the Bills matchup we all knew was going to happen the second they made that trade. And so we can see what happens with that. The Bills are the better football team. Their drop back EPA is almost double the Chiefs. Their ground game is better. Their QB has played better this year. Their O-line is better. The Chiefs' D-line is better, but it's Mahomes. And so, I mean, that's kind of the trump card. It's Mahomes. Nothing else really matters. You just have to feel like the Chiefs, especially the way Travis Kelce looked in the last game, are probably going to be able to channel their dark magic again and somehow win this game.
To me, I think it comes down to the Bills defense. And we talked about that, my Bills big game McDermott theory I think they wear down. I think they come out hot. They start the games hot, these Kansas City, these Baltimore, these Cincinnati games, and something wears them down. Maybe that's a run game thing. Maybe that's not going to be as much of a factor in this one against Kansas City with a team that's not running the ball all that well. But you look at the Bills defense down the stretch, and this is the defense after I still think the best version of the Bills that we've gotten all year long was the stretch of time. They went 34-10 against the Titans, 31-10 against the Seahawks, 30-27 against the Dolphins, a little closer than it should be, 30-20 against the Colts, and then they wrapped that up by going 30-21 win against Kansas City, and then they blow out San Francisco. Since that game, I don't think they've been the same dominant Bills. And I know that that's crazy to say after they beat that Ravens team. Like I laid out, I feel like there were a lot of plays that could have played out in that game that make that game go differently. Lamar gets hit out of bounds, no flag. They end up punting on a 3rd down. Josh gets a defensive pass interference on 3rd and 5. It goes from a 48-yard field goal in the snow to 1st and goal on the 5. Mark Andrews fumbles. Mark Andrews drops it in the end zone. But you look at the Bills defense, they gave up 44 to the Rams. Next weekend, they gave up 42 to the Lions. The next weekend, they barely beat the Patriots 24-21 in a game where Drake May and the Patriots had the ball to try to win the game. And then they gave up 25 in that Ravens game that could have been more if not for a couple turnovers and a couple, big plays. I just think that there's a McDermott issue with the defense down the stretch in games, and I think Kansas City is going to take advantage of it. I think Kansas City, I don't know what the numbers look like. I think Kansas City has a way better defense in this game.
Yeah, that's ultimately probably what it comes down to. The Bills have a better offense. The Chiefs have a better defense, and I don't know if you want to rely on having the better offense when the other offense features Patrick Mahomes. So that's a tough line to walk. Yeah. Everything in my head tells me that the Bills are the better team, but I can't pick the Bills. You just can't until it happens. So I said last year after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, when I stupidly said post-trade deadline that when the Chiefs lose in the AFC Championship game, we're going to talk about them not making a move for a receiver. I'll never pick against the Chiefs again until they actually lose one. So I'll take the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs are winning their 3rd straight Super Bowl in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I hate that. So no. Let's go on to the NFC Championship game and an NFC East matchup between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. Much like the Bills were the only team to take down the Chiefs starters this season. The Commanders are the only team to beat the Eagles since their Week 5 bye. And obviously, Jalen Hurts knocked out of that game. The game looked to be trending towards a blowout before that happened. And Obviously, that didn't happen. There's big questions about Jalen Hurts' health after the knee injury. And we're not going to get answers to that this week. We just won't. We're going to get answers in the first quarter of the game. And they need Hurts healthy because the passing game has been horrendous through 2 playoff games. And you're winning games, and that's what's important. And the rushing attack and the defense have been winning you football games. But the passing game hasn't been good. And the run game takes a pretty big hit if Jalen Hurts doesn't have mobility, because the QB run game is such a big part of what makes this work for the Eagles. And so that's the key thing to watch on the Eagles side. And then on the Commanders side, you have Jaden Daniels. I mean, the Eagles have the talent advantage at every position in this game outside of quarterback. And I think the Commanders have a pretty big edge there. Eagles fans won't want to hear that. They also have the better offensive play caller. And Jaden Daniels has been special this year, but he is a rookie. But he's looked very poised in the postseason. The last time these two teams met, he threw 2 interceptions, including one that should have sealed the game. But the Eagles offense couldn't pick up a single first down. And granted, it was backups. And then he led a 2-minute drill touchdown drive, which was his 5th touchdown of the day to win the game. And so the Eagles were able to get turnovers from Jaden Daniels the last time they played. Jaden Daniels just feasted on the Lions and their blitz happiness. The Eagles don't really blitz very much. We talked about how Washington has allowed a greater than a 50% success rate by their defense in both of their playoff games. And so the Eagles should be able to move the ball, but a lot of it's going to come down to Jalen Hurts' mobility and the passing game, I think, because what the Commanders did the last time they played, and granted, Kenny Pickett was your quarterback at that point in time, but they stacked the box, they played single high, and they really had their defensive backs sit like 10 yards off the line of scrimmage and just sit on those timing routes outside because they knew the Eagles weren't going to go deep. Now, they did uncork a couple deep shots in their last game, but it's not something they've done a lot over the last, month of Jalen Hurts playing football. His last 4 games, I should say, because he missed most of the last month. But that's the thing for me to watch, is what the Eagles are able to do against the Commanders defense, if they're able to get the passing game off the ground, if the QB run game works, and then if the Eagles defense is able to clamp down one more time. The Eagles are favored by 5.5 right now in this one. What are you looking at in this game?
Yeah, I'm not as worried about the passing game. I think you add the 65 yards from the A.J. Brown drop and the 30 yards from the Dallas Goedert penalty, and we're probably talking differently. He was still 15 for 20 in the game. I thought the issue was more, if anything, about the sacks and kind of pocket awareness than the passing game in that one. I know that the stats aren't eye-popping in any way, but I'm not worried about Jalen. And I know that you probably have to say Jaden's the better quarterback. I don't think that there's a wide edge there. This is still Jaden Daniels that only put up 23 points in the wild card round. And, we've put up more than that in both I guess we put up 22 in the first round. But and then it's also the same Jaden Daniels that went 22 for 32 for 191 and a pick the first time that we faced him. And he threw 2 picks the second time that we faced him. And they were up 21-7 with Jalen in the game before Jalen got hurt in that game. I am not worried about Jalen's the knee and the passing game. So I am probably going to feel more confident than most. And, the line is sitting here at 5.5, and that opened at 5. It's up to 5.5, and it seems like it's going to trend towards 6.5. I wouldn't bet that number. I think that there's a chance it's a pretty close game, pretty low scoring close game potentially. But ultimately, it comes down to defense. I don't think this Washington defense is going to hold up. And I know that they were able to stack the box and make things happen when Jalen went out of the game and Kenny Pickett was in there. I think Jalen's going to be able to make enough happen down the field with AJ and with a couple other guys that you can look at what Jahmyr Gibbs did in that game. 14 for 105, 7.5 yards per carry. They were able to break one with Jameson Williams for 61 yards on an end around. I think you're going to be able to succeed against this defense. I mean, you said it, the Lions had a better success rate than the Commanders did in that game. came down to the fact that the Lions turned the ball over 5 times. And the one thing that the Eagles are doing more than anything, and, we can debate how concerned we should be about the passing game and if they'll be able to run the ball next week. The one thing we're doing more than anything is not turning the ball over.
Yeah.
And that I would say that, there might be some turnover regression coming for that, but it seems like it's a pretty diagnosable part of what our offense is trying to do. And we're maybe sacrificing some chances, sacrificing some, creativity on the offense in order to protect the ball and to not turn the ball over. And I don't know if that's just because we think we're better than every team that we faced in the playoffs. And you kind of think when you're that much better that you can kind of keep the ball and then, keep the ball in the middle of the field and not necessarily have to take too many chances. By the way, keep the ball in the middle of the field was not a term for what we were doing, and kind of just that was like an analogy of just to roll the balls out there and don't make a mistake. And they think they're going to win that game. I wonder to see if that'll be kind of the same thing with Washington, or if they stack the box, they do take those shots down the field. And by the way, last week they faked the tush push and went down the field to AJ Brown. Little bit of an overthrow from Jalen. I thought that the route was a little weird from AJ on that as well. And then in this game, they take the shot down the field to AJ Brown, drops the ball. So they have taken at least one shot in each game, and they'll definitely do that again next week. It probably should be 2 or 3 shots.
They took one to Devontae Smith too, and he got obliterated. And
actually, they took another one to AJ in the end zone that should have been picked. Actually, if I'm going to point out all the things that could have happened for Jalen that were positive, I should probably point out the things that could have happened that were negative. That should have been a pick in the end zone. I don't know what Jalen was looking at when he threw that ball to AJ. I think that was AJ wasn't reading inner excellence on the sideline. He was probably in Jalen's ear telling him, "Hey, get me the damn ball." And then he was like, "All right, I guess I'll throw it." And to him, it did look like the safety. I think it was Cam Curl, your boy. I think he made a pretty good play on the ball and kind of ran over. It looked like he wasn't. I think Jalen thought there was single coverage, and the safety kind of broke from his stride. It looked like to go towards the ball.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Our conference championship game previews. We'll be back here next week. I guess we'll probably just recap because we'll have a whole other week to preview the Super Bowl, but we'll work those details out behind the scenes. What do you have, Mark?
Never mind. Wait, I forgot about the fact that we do it, and my boss, or my boss, my dog is apparently raising her hand that she wants to talk as well. I forgot about the final thoughts, so I'll let you cook until final.
Oh, okay. Well, that was pretty much it. I was about to throw it to final thoughts. So we're gonna get out of here. Let me ask you, Mark. Do you have any final thoughts for us?
I do. I do have some final thoughts. I think last week, we couldn't remember exactly what we did, but I think last week we ranked the coach jobs available, the 6 best jobs. I don't think I gave my 6 candidates that I would look at that would hire me, or that I would hire. If I was a fan looking to get excited about a head coach candidate, these are the only 6 that I think I could get myself excited about. Ben Johnson, obviously. Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady, who we've pushed for multiple years on this show. Bucks offensive coordinator Liam Cohen, who was in college at Kentucky and might have put some lipstick on a pig with Will Levis when he was there. And then obviously that Tampa offense was really good this year. It didn't miss a beat without Canales. I really like Liam Cohen. Todd Monken. 2 years in a row with Baltimore has really taken Lamar to another level as a passer. And then you look at the fact that Georgia offense hasn't looked quite as good since Todd Monken's left campus. They haven't won a title since he's left campus. Maybe he is. Maybe it wasn't just Bowers and McConkey leaving that hurt that offense. Maybe it was Monken as well. Number 5, you're not going to like this one as much. It's Kellen Moore, and I'm not as confident in this one as the other 4. This one goes back to the Dallas days. I thought he was doing a phenomenal job back in the Dallas days. And I really thought that Dallas offense took a step back in terms of creativity, in terms of spreading the ball around, and especially in terms of the running game when Kellen Moore left. I mean, look at that Dallas running game, even Tony Pollard's efficiency when Kellen Moore was there, and then look at it after Kellen Moore left and it was McCarthy calling plays. That would be my Kellen Moore argument. I've kind of been doing the Kellen Moore argument before he was the Eagles OC, that he should get a shot. I wouldn't say anything the last 2 years is either way. I mean, they were still a pretty darn good offense. They're 13-0 now in games that Jalen, Lane, and AJ finished the game and started. And then my last one, I wanted to throw this at you. Pete Carroll. He's the only non-offensive play caller, OC type that I think I would take a look at. I think I'd take a look at him before the DC's on the board. I thought even at the end there, was Seattle really a better team this year than they were last year? I feel like they were kind of the same. And Mike McDonald was this guy everybody tried to tell me was great. I still think Pete Carroll got more out of every team he coached out of the last 5 to 10 years out of his career than he should have.
Yeah, I noticed you didn't mention Marcus Freeman.
I think he's only been a head coach for 3 years. It seems a little crazy, especially the Bears, who really have to nail this hire. It does seem crazy to me to go with like a defensive college head coach as your guy for the NFL. Hey, I love the guy. What he's done with Notre Dame, I could never thank him enough. But I don't know if I would be able to pull the trigger if I was an owner on Marcus Freeman.
Yeah. All right.
Any big disagreements there outside of Kellen Moore, or any big takes there?
I don't know on Pete Carroll.
That's fair.
Maybe I'm just generally out on defensive guys, but it is a little bit of a wild card. He's also really old. I don't know. Maybe Kellen Moore, like maybe somebody will hire him. I was a bigger Kellen Moore advocate before watching him call plays for the Eagles this year.
How involved is Nick?
I think the offense looks pretty different from previous years, but I still sure. I just go back to on my film show with Johnny last week. I asked him, I was like, so here's the thing. I think about the Eagles passing attack and the weapons they have and really cool pass design. And I go back to week 1 at Brazil. They had that double post wheel route to Saquon for a touchdown. And then I think from there, when the next time I watched film, it was like, oh, that was a well-designed, cool concept. And I literally can't think of one the entire rest of the season. And so I don't know, even if there's an element of like Jalen doesn't want to do a lot of these things, eventually like you have to be the coach and say, we're doing some of these things anyways, because they're good and they work. And so I don't know how you suss out blame, but I think the Eagles passing attack has been very underwhelming from a terms of design standpoint. I thought his game plan last week in the playoffs was the worst game plan I've seen from the Eagles since last year when they lost to the Bucs in the playoffs. So I have some reservations about Kellen Moore, but I can see why. I mean, he may get a job and he may be really good at it. Like, it's hard with him because I have generally been a big fan and he did solve a lot of the Eagles blitz issues. And so the Kellen Moore thing, I'm basically at the point as an Eagles fan, if Kellen Moore gets hired away, I'm not going to be like really upset about it because I think you can maybe get somebody better or somebody with some different ideas, maybe not better, but different ideas that will work out better. If he stays, I'm also not going to be disappointed by that because I think he's a solid play caller who solved blitz issues, and it'd be nice to have some continuity. So he kind of threads that needle of like indifference for me. It's like, if he gets hired away, okay. If he stays, okay. I think I won't have a strong reaction either way.
I think my biggest complaint with Kellen, and this is more of, again, I still think a lot of what Kellen's doing is being dictated to him by Nick and Jalen. And I think he probably will. That's probably it's probably the head coach interviews when you go into what's happening and why that's happening. But the thing that concerned me more than anything else would be the third and it feels like we used to play for 4th and short and 3rd and short a little bit more. Whereas it doesn't feel like we realize that 4th and 1 is our superpower anymore. It feels like we're not playing to get to 4th and 1, playing to get to 3rd and 1. Whereas it felt in 2022 like Steichen had that perfectly in terms of playing to get to that 1 yard first down. I don't know if that's, again, a Kellen Moore thing or a Jalen and a Nick thing, but he would be those top 4. I would say the Ben Johnson, the Joe Brady, Liam Cohen, Todd Monken. Those are the 4. If any of those 4 don't get hired, I think that the NFL is drunk.
Maybe I was going to say maybe that's the Jason Kelce factor for the QB sneaks, but maybe that's not the case. In 2022, the Eagles were 36 of 39 on QB sneaks. In 2023, they were 35 of 42. And in 2024, they are 30 of 37. So it's about the same as last year in terms of how frequently they're converting them. But
I feel like they're more often on the 1 yard line now.
Yeah.
Than they used to. Like, I feel like you used to get more middle of the field tush pushes than we get now.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, I think that's going to about wrap it up. Oh, we got comment throwback to last week asking about flag football coaching. Okay. I'll briefly tell my flag football career because we're an hour and 15 minutes into the podcast for my final thoughts. But so I played flag football pretty competitively in college. I also coached my wife's flag football team. We weren't married at the time, but that's how I roped her in was my head coaching prowess. So, when people say I don't know ball, I literally got my wife because I was such a good coach. So she may dispute how that happened, but so I coached their flag football and they weren't super competitive. We just had a good time with it. But my junior year in college, we got a new intramural football director, and he decided to get the school involved in like regional and national flag football stuff. And so most schools will take like the team that wins their A-League and put them in a regional tournament or something. He didn't do that. He picked like an all-star team from different teams. And I was the only guy playing B-League flag football. I'd stopped playing with like my ultra competitive team after sophomore year, because I was getting into some more upper level classes that made it hard to keep up with the practice schedule. So I played with a bunch of my roommates and their friends that were music majors. And I was like, you can read into the athleticism things, what you will. I won't badmouth my teammates. We had a good time, but I was the only guy that got pulled out of the B League to go play on this team. And we ended up making it to nationals. I was a pass rusher because flag football rules are different in terms of blocking and things, but made it to nationals, and we made it all the way to the finals, and we played against Air Force's practice squad, like their legit practice squad. And let me just tell you, those guys are different. Like, we're talking guys that walked on to a mid-level service academy football team, and I couldn't touch them. Like, they didn't even try to block me. They just gave me a free run at the quarterback every play. And the ball was either out before I got to him, or he could make me like, I had 7 sacks in the semifinal and quarterfinals combined. And I touched his flags one time the entire game, and I still didn't get him off. Like, it's the whole, like, I'm closer to LeBron than you are to me thing. I learned that day the massive gap between me, who is a really athletic guy, and a guy who walked on to a service academy's football team and played for their scout team. Just night and day difference. So, yeah. So whenever you're sitting on a couch and you're watching a game and you're like, I could make that throw, you couldn't. It's insane. So that's my flag football stories, I guess. But the main thing is not that I just got embarrassed by a scout team quarterback. The main thing is that my coaching prowess is how I got my wife. So people should listen to me. I definitely know ball.
There you go.
So there you go. Fun stuff here. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening to our ramblings about the glory days of flag football and coach hires. It's been a fun season hanging out with you guys. It's not over. Like I said, we will be back next week to break down conference championship games. We will preview the Super Bowl before the Super Bowl. We've got all of our prop bets we placed at the beginning of the year that we will revisit and see who got the most of those right. So a lot of stuff coming your way. And then between the end of the season and the draft, this show will phase out a little bit because we used to do our draft ranking stuff on Chalk Talk. This year it will be under the Armchair Scouts banner. So it'll still be me and Mark along with Dives and Ryan. But this show will disappear from your feed a little bit post Super Bowl to the draft, and then we'll pick it back up with all of our post-draft content. So we won't disappear from your feed. It'll just be under a little bit different banner. But thank you guys for joining us. Just stay subscribed to the Eagles Pinpool Network feed. You'll get all the content that we put out. If you enjoy the show, share it with people. I got a message on Twitter a week ago. Somebody was asking what happened to the BGN feed. And I was like, bro, we've been doing Eagles Pinpool Network for 10 months now. And some people still haven't found it because they're not active on social media. So Share it out with your friends. We really appreciate it. Rate and review the podcast. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr., and we will catch you guys next time.